Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I want to talk about some of your choices for climbing roses. I just came across some extra space myself here along these posts for climbing roses I have to choose. So let's jump in together and have a look at some of the pictures and descriptions of some of the most popular and sought after of climbing roses. One of the most widely grown of the modern climbers is this one behind me here called New Dawn. Now, New Dawn is a delicate pink, reblooming rose, beautiful, nicely scented, and even going into October now, still has a few lingering blooms on here. So it is truly a repeat bloomer. It grows in that range of 10, even up to 20 feet if you train it along. So it can be a larger climber, you'd want to give it some space. The second rose I'm going to highlight today is called Don Juan, and like New Dawn, it has been in the trade for decades. And the secret to its lasting power is the scent, just a strong damask old garden rose scent, and of course it's formed like a florist's rose as well. It's not immune to black spot, it's not the perfect rose for health of foliage, but has lasting power in the garden because of its wonderful qualities. On the other side of that archway I have Eden, or Pierre de Ronsard, which is, by the way, the most requested of all of my climbing roses right now, and I want to show you why, and hopefully I can keep this in focus as I bring it up closer to the camera. Hope that works. But wow, those pink edges on the cream rose, moderately scented, reblooming, and that romantic, fully petaled shape, just gorgeous. So people are a sucker for this, and for good reason. I'm going to list off a few now that I can't show you in my garden because they're not in bloom right now, but they have such exceptional qualities that I have no problem talking about them and then just inserting the pictures. First up is Laguna, which has a strong pink color, but I'm not sure that describes the color fully. I almost detect a hint of coral in there. Beautiful rose, exceptionally healthy foliage, and they call it a smallish climber, like 8 to 10 feet, but I've seen it grow a little bit larger in some public gardens. Also, I want to list off Westerland, one of my favorite roses of all time. It's a strong orange, stiff canes, grows tall. You can grow it freestanding, or you can train it more horizontally for more blooming. Great rose, strongly scented, and very, very healthy. Along the lines of Westerland, I can also recommend another rose called Polka. Now, Polka is in one of my favorite color groups, apricot. And the apricot blooms on this one have another special feature that I really love, is the scalloped edges of the flowers. Just gorgeous. Sometimes nodding flowers, again nicely scented, and just a good healthy rose. And also I want to give a good mention to Rosarium Uetersen, which is a silvery pink, if you can imagine that color. Really, again, strong performer in the garden, disease resistant, strongly scented, smells like green apples, and just a wonderful performer here. I use it in several places. I want to mention a rose now that I featured on my Instagram this year. It's called Roberta Bondar, after the Canadian astronaut. I don't know how widely distributed this rose is, but it absolutely should be. Just a gorgeous yellow color. I believe it's the offspring of a rose I'll be mentioning later on the list, Buff Beauty, but just gorgeous and a wonderful performer with large yellow flowers. Now, going from something that might not be well available to a couple that I know for sure will be widely available this coming year. They are both Kordes roses from their breeding program, and they've done some wonderful things with climbers. First one I want to mention is Kiss Me Kate, and the second one I want to mention is Florentina. I'll be carrying both of these this coming year because they impressed me so much with their vibrant colors, their wonderful scent, and also because they were bred to have thin, pliable canes that you can more easily train horizontally, and as I'll mention later, that's an important feature for roses if you want to get the best of the blooms from them. 3 standbys from my garden that I just love. The first one is Souvenir du Docteur Jamain. This is a hybrid perpetual rose with just the deepest velvety purple roses, blooms that have a wonderful scent. It does take a little extra care and attention in the garden, loves to be well fed, even likes a slightly shadier spot for the afternoon to be sheltered from the hot sun, but well worth the effort, I will say. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Holmes is easy to grow, super easy. You almost can't stop it. You can grow it as a large shrub, or you can train it up as a climber. Has wide open flowers, indicative of its hybrid musk heritage. It has a nice scent coming from the stamens, I believe, rather than the petals, so it's a strong musky scent, and love Sally Holmes, very adaptable, tough, and beautiful. And finally, this one right behind me here, and I picked some blooms from it just to show you, because even this late in the season, Ghislaine de Feligonde, which I know I must be mispronouncing badly, but it has these clusters of apricot buds ripening out to buff-colored flowers. Gorgeous. It just shows complexity, and this one is good in the shade as well. So like other hybrid musks, it has a little more tolerance for a shady location. So if you have a tough spot in the garden, this might be an option for you. Okay, I'll be good. I know that people want some David Austin recommendations, and although I haven't grown a lot of David Austin climbers, I'm planning on rectifying that this year. So I looked around in the catalogs and also took some recommendations. And the two that I'm probably going to try to add into my garden this year, the first one is Gertrude Jekyll, which is apparently strongly scented and comes well recommended. The second one I have my eye on is called The Pilgrim, which follows my theme of liking stronger colors. This one more towards a strong yellow, I think, with darker centers. So both of those will be added to my collection this year, and of course I'll be adding Austin's upcoming as well. My very favorite climber, bar none, is Buff Beauty. That's this one behind me here. It has no blooms on it today, but as you can see, lots of strong growth. What I love about Buff Beauty is it has darker buds, lighter blooms, goes out to a buff color, but just covers itself with these gorgeous, perfectly formed blooms, nicely scented, and does that repeatedly throughout the season. It might be a matter of personal taste, but Buff Beauty ticks all the boxes for me. Now, before I finish up with my roundup of roses, everything that I've listed before this point have been repeat bloomers to one extent or another. I want to finish off the list with two once bloomers that might still be worth space in your garden. The first one is called Albertine, has a beautiful pink color. I'll show some pictures here as well, but it has a beautiful rambling, scrambling habit, informal, gorgeous, just covers itself with blooms. And that's the one thing about the once bloomers, is that when they bloom, usually they bloom intensely. That's definitely the case for the second one I want to mention, which is the Lady Banks rose, which has the distinction of having been grown into one of the largest roses in the world in a couple of places. So this one has tiny little yellow flowers on it, but when it blooms en masse, the effect is spectacular. And I'll insert some pictures here of that as well. So you've stuck with me this long looking at the examples of roses. I hope you'll stick with me just a little bit longer here. I have a couple important points to make about the climbers. First of all is that the climbers are not a specific breed of roses. Unlike the miniatures or the floribundas or the hybrid teas that can be divided into a group, the climbers actually come from all over the family tree of roses. The reason for this is because the climbers are actually defined by their usage. They just happen to be members of the other classes of roses that can throw long, preferably pliable canes that you can train up things. This is the next point I want to make, is that nothing within the rose family truly climbs like other plants climb. So if you look at wisteria or even climbing hydrangea, they have parts of the plant that are meant to attach them to things. They'll have tendrils, or they'll have roots that will grab onto things. That isn't so with the roses. The roses just have their canes, they have some thorns, and they'll throw those long canes, and left naturally, oftentimes, they'll just turn into a mounded shrub or bramble, just like you'd see at a blackberry patch. It's generally the fact that humans intervene that gets them to climb up something. Occasionally you'll see a very strong growing plant that scrambles up a tree, but that isn't an average or a normal behavior for roses. Generally it makes them into a bit of a rambler. So all of that said, it turns out that the climbing roses need your intervention, and the way that you train them, this time of year, it's fall, it isn't a great time for me to show you that training, but I've made a couple of videos on that. One of them is more the general theory, and the other one is an example of that. I'm going to put both of those in turn up on the screen here so you can link through to them to get that information. This is a great time to plant your roses, by the way, just not a great, in my climate, just not a great time to be pruning. Now, in terms of that pruning, I just want to go through the general options here, because of course you can train them and tie them up to a structure, and the idea is, if you tie them to a structure, you want to train them to be to go upwards, but then sideways, horizontal. It's the horizontal stems within a climbing rose that usually are the most productive and give you the most flowers. A second way you can handle climbing roses is to have them as a freestanding shrub, but then just pin down their stems. It's in a term called pegging. You can pin them down to a low structure, or you can pin them right down to the ground. And by taking that pliable stem and then putting an arch into it, you're creating some more of that horizontal wood, which will bloom more strongly. And then of course a third way you can do it is like Sally Holmes or Westerland. There are some climbers that, even though they're called climbers or can be used as climbers, that you can also use them as a freestanding shrub. And it's something I've experimented with a lot on the farm here. I do that with Sally Holmes, I do that with Westerland, I do that with Ghislaine de Feligonde. So certainly it's something worth trying if you don't have a way that you can pin them down within your yard, or don't have the horizontal space to offer, that you can just grow them kind of freestanding and see how they do. Alright, that's all I had to say about climbers today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions about these, I'm sure I've left a ton off the list as well, drop those into the comments below the video and I'll see what I can do to help.